Civil War. Aims. Whites' disadvantages. The whites were made up of different groups who had entirely different aims and beliefs. They could not agree on whether they were fighting for the monarchism, republicanism, or for the Constituent Assembly. This made it hard for them to cooperate and impossible to develop a coherent political strategy. They were united only in their desire to get rid of the Bolsheviks, but this was not strong enough aim. Bolsheviks' advantages. The Bolsheviks had only one aim, to survive, so they were clearly focused. Geographical factors. White disadvantages. The whites were scattered around the edges of central Russia and their armies were separated by large distances. This made communication difficult, especially moving men and weapons and coordinating the attacks of different white armies. They had no telephone links and had to use officers on horseback to convey messages. Bolshevik advantages. The Bolsheviks held the central area including Moscow and Petrograd. The areas contained the main armament factories in Russia, so the Bolsheviks could manufacture munitions supply. They moved their capital to Moscow, centre of the railway network, making it easier to move men and munitions to the battlefronts. The central area was heavily populated, so the Bolsheviks were able to conscript large numbers to fight. Red armies were vastly outnumbered their white opponents. Leadership. White disadvantages. Lack of unity and leadership meant that they were incapable of developing an effective military strategy. Often white generals would not work together because they did not like or trust each other. Other generals were suspicious of Kolchak's motives and intentions. White leaders were generally second-rate. Several were cruel and treated their men with contempt. Desertion rates were high. Indiscipline and corruption was rife. Kolchak's base in Omsk, uniforms and munitions supplied by foreign allies were sold on the black market, and some of the officers lived in brothels. Bolshevik advantages. Lenin. He ordered the closure of the Constituent Assembly and reduced the rights of other political parties. He signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany, bringing Russia out of the war. This was humiliating in terms of loss in land and resources, but Lenin recognized that it was essential if the Bolsheviks were able to focus all their attention on winning the Civil War. He introduced war communism, requisitioning of grain from the peasants, and nationalization of industry. To ensure that the Red Army got the supplies it needed, he supported the Red Terror, the Cheka, to suppress opposition. They shot 8,000 people in 1918. They took actions against the SRs and Mensheviks, and most famously the execution of the Tsar and his family in 1918, which deprived the whites of a unifying symbol. They left military decisions to Trotsky. He supported Trotsky's decision to restore ranks in the army, not popular with the soldiers, but Lenin knew it was necessary to ensure discipline. Trotsky. The Bolsheviks had a single and unified command structure led by Trotsky. Trotsky transformed the Red Army into an effective fighting force. He was able to inspire and rally his men. He had a special train in which he would visit the front line to support his men. He inspired loyalty by promoting on ability. Even someone who was not a member of the Communist Party could be promoted if they showed ability. He ensured that discipline in the Red Army was tough. The death penalty was used frequently. Peasant conscripts who were treated in battle might be gunned down by their own side. He also brought back hierarchical structures in the army to enforce discipline. He made use of 40,000 ex-arist officers who were watched over by political commissars to ensure their loyalty. He set up labour battalions to dig ditches. He realised the importance of holding Petrograd against an attack by the white forces. Lenin had wanted to abandon the defence of the city, but Trotsky knew that, as the home of the revolution, it had symbolic importance. The Reds eventually forced the whites back and held on to Petrograd. Support. White disadvantages. The whites had made it clear that the land seized by the peasants would be restored to its former owners, so they lost peasant support. The whites lost the support of national minorities because they made it clear that they wanted to restore Russian Empire to pre-1917 borders. Their slogan was Russia One and Indivisible. This antagonized national groups such as the Ukrainians and Georgians, who were looking for greater independence. The whites had little support among the urban working classes, as they had little to offer them. Summary. To many, the whites represented a step back, a return to the past. To those who made gains in the period February to October 1917, this was not acceptable. Bolshevik advantages. The support of the peasantry was vital. While the peasants had no love for either side, the Bolshevik land decree had legitimized their right to the land. The Bolshevik decree on nationalities 1918 offered hope to national minorities that they would have greater freedom under Bolshevik rule. The Bolsheviks did not have widespread support among the urban workers, but they were considered a better alternative than the whites. Summary. The Bolsheviks may have not been popular, but they offered a better alternative than the whites, especially to those who had made gains in the period February to October 1917 and wanted to protect those gains. Propaganda. Whites' disadvantages. The whites failed to appreciate the value of good propaganda. Foreign intervention should have worked in the whites' favour, but instead it turned into a propaganda disaster. Support from foreign powers was half-hearted and largely ineffective, and dried up after 1919. The The whites were presented by the Bolsheviks as working with foreign enemies. Bolshevik advantages. The Bolsheviks were quick to see the value of propaganda. The Bolsheviks used imaginative and powerful images that the whites would take land from the peasants and that the Reds offered a wonderful new society for workers and peasants. The Bolsheviks were able to present the whites as being in the pay of foreign enemies and present themselves as defenders of Russian soil against foreign invaders.